So, hello again from Malta, in the heart of the Mediterranean, and as we have explained before. Now I'm not alone. I'm joined with my two colleagues, the Honourable Minister Clayton Bartolo, who is responsible for financial services and the digital economy, and we're also joined by Gareth, who is CEO of TrustStamp, who has recently expanded to Malta with an R&D center. I welcome you to this chat, and with no further ado, I'll turn to the Minister for the introductory question. Can you give us a brief overview of Malta's digital innovation ecosystem? On to you.
In the sense that we won't be looking just at blockchain, but we are looking to start certifying a number of other software and also critical infrastructure, which also can be found under this same legislation. This is being done through the Malta Digital Innovation Authority, which we refer to as the MDIA, and which in fact, in the coming weeks, will be launching a technological sandbox in order to ensure that investors can find a place where to invest here in Malta and also launch their products so that they can also take advantage of a number of schemes which are offered by Malta Enterprise. So this will be an ongoing collaboration with this entity which is responsible for attracting FDI towards Malta. As a matter of fact, we have also, over the past years, undertaken and been the first movers when it comes to blockchain. Blockchain, which the government is looking at making use of so as to digitize its operations. And now in the coming weeks, and also more will follow in the next year, we will also be investing heavily in cybersecurity, which we understand is very important in order to ensure that those who are looking at enacting their digital media and in order to digitize, you need to have a good cybersecurity arrangement, and this is something which we'll be investing heavily in over the next months.
Thank you, Mr. Bartolo, for your first input. As we've been explaining in the introduction, because I believe there were some issues with the audio, we are together joined today with Junior Minister for Financial Services and Digital Economy from Malta, for Malta, and on my left, and I'll turn to you, Gareth from TrustStamp, that has recently expanded to Malta. And I'd like to start off with a question exactly on that. So you've been in contact with Malta Enterprise since April 2019, and 3 months ago you opened your R&D facility in Malta. I know it's still early days, but what are your first impressions of Malta?
Well, for us, Malta has been an incredible, successful entry into the European Union. You mentioned R&D, and that's a very important part of everything that we do. But when we looked at becoming part of the community in Malta, we were also looking at the size of the European Union. For many of us in America, we have to remember that the European Union as a bloc is 50% bigger in economic terms than the United States. And so it was an important market for us as an American company. But in order to enter it, we really needed to have a base in the European Union. And so when we looked at the countries that were welcoming, we found that Malta was offering an incredibly proactive approach to business. And Malta Enterprise basically laid the way for us to see that we would be successful here, and everything that they promised us has been true so far.
May I turn back to you, Bartolo? Malta has been positioning itself at the forefront, we can say, when it comes to emerging technologies. Can you elaborate a bit further when it comes to Malta's efforts on Fintech and AI specifically?
Yeah, so first of all, allow me to start with AI, where we can see that the first thing which we have understood is that you cannot take AI on its own, but AI is always seen with something else. So this is the way that we are drafting our legislation in order also to be up to date with the latest trends and technologies in a sector which is evolving day after day. And in fact, this is why we are widening our ITAS regulation in order also to include AI with it, with the aim of also emphasizing more this sector in our local economy. And we are also participating in the white paper which has been prepared by the European Union with regards to AI regulation at EU level, and the principles of which are also being understood and enacted by the government. Above all, we are understanding that education and research and development need to be at the forefront of our efforts. And in fact, we are undertaking an educational campaign in the Maltese schools, and we have also launched AI scholarships together with the University of Malta. So here we are understanding that education is very important for us to build a better human capital workforce. Our human capital is the best asset which we have as an island, and it is our impact. We are totally focused on investing in our workforce in order to ensure that the workforce of tomorrow is prepared to make the best out of all the opportunities which are coming out of AI. And in this regard, the government will also be looking at implementing a number of use cases such as AI in education, AI in tourism, and also AI in traffic management, all of which are looking to be very exciting promises for the coming months. As regards Fintech, Malta was the first jurisdiction to enact a legislative and regulatory framework to regulate the provision of tech services as well as crypto assets and exchanges. This was done through the enactment of 3 legislations, which is the Innovative Technologies and Arrangements Act, which I already mentioned before, and which is currently being widened in order to encapsulate more innovative technologies. Then we have the Malta Digital Innovation Authority Act, which sets up the authority which in actual fact is regulating this sector. And then we also have the Virtual Financial Assets Act, which is the act which regulates cryptos, crypto exchanges, and also tokens. And here we are also making headway in issuing the first licenses within a few months.
And a complementary question to that. So yes, it's obvious that the Maltese government is looking at consolidating fintech companies in Malta, attracting companies to Malta, but also spearheading innovation that transcends within the community. But an additional point pertaining now to startups and how to make these 3 pieces of legislation more appealing to startups is the element of sandboxes. And I know that your ministry, alongside with MDIA, are currently working on putting in place sandboxes for fintech startups as well.
Yes, as a matter of fact, in 2019, Malta launched its MFSA Fintech strategy, which is a strategy based for fintech, and it was launched by the Malta Financial Services Authority. And as part of this fintech strategy, which strategy is aimed at harnessing innovation through technology, we have launched our first sandbox, a sandbox which allows investors to come to Malta and place their product in a controlled environment whereby its development and also its involvement with the customers can be monitored in a controlled market environment. This way, the authority will be sure that both the investors as well as the customers are getting the best out of this product, and also ensuring protection and market integrity. 2 elements which enhance trust when one comes to use these products. And then we are also looking at entrusting financial soundness. And these are done through regulations, whereby we are adopting regulatory and supervisory initiatives to support innovation and improve regulatory efficiency. An ecosystem where we are looking at fostering a community, demand and collaboration, and also enhance access to finance. The architecture itself, which encourages collaboration through adoption of open application programming and also shared platforms. International links, this is very important for Malta, where we are looking to build international links across various jurisdictions and also to foster collaboration and trust. Knowledge where we cultivate deep talent pools and stimulate research and collaborative ideas. Also security, where we need once again to ensure cybersecurity is at its highest level in order to eliminate as much as possible any threats which are received. Over the past years, Malta has placed itself as an excellent center for financial services. We are also looking at becoming a well-regulated banking sector with a number of international banks working here in Malta, and this then forms the background for the fintech investment which we want to attract towards our island in order to continue enhancing this sector and providing more opportunities both to local talent as well as international talent and investors who will be looking to either set up or else expand their operations here in Malta, where from here then they can continue to expand their operations towards the European Union or else towards North Africa, just as our friends TrustStamp here have recently done.
Thank you, Minister. And Gareth, let me turn to you and maybe delve deeper on the issue of regulation. Sometimes regulation and startups might seem as anathema, going against each other. But what are your views on well-regulated environments vis-a-vis startups?
We work at the intersection of RegTech, Fintech, and AI. And that's a very complex area to work. And by its nature, it requires our customers to be able to have confidence in what we do. That means that we have to be in a regulated environment. But we look at sandboxes in those countries, and they tend to be very single focus. So you go into a RegTech sandbox, but there is absolutely no review of the AI being used and no expertise. What really attracted us in terms of MDIA is the more holistic view that's being taken. So yes, there is already a fintech sandbox. Yes, there is a blockchain and distributed ledger technology sandbox. But now there'll be an AI sandbox. So these merging together, from our point of view, provide the holistic overview that's needed. And we're never going to develop this type of innovation and have it broadly accepted if there isn't some oversight which allows an independent view as to whether or not the technology can be trusted.
So if you have to crystallize, what are the benefits of a sandbox to a company like yourself? I know we already said it once, but crystallize it.
Yeah, certainly. So certainty in the first place. It's the ability to have one set of people that you can relate to in terms of putting planning in place and getting the support that you need, as opposed to the uncertainty of dealing with multiple regulators on one set of issues. And secondly, the fact that if you deliver as you promise at the end of the sandbox, you'll have something you can take out to the world. You'll have an independent proof that your product does what you said it would. And that's incredibly valuable.
Minister, today we are participating in South Fintech, and thanks to Gareth, that was also a go-between for us to be here today. Georgia, Malta, do you see any synergies in the area of tech for the future between the two sides?
Yeah, before we started, I was having a chat with Gareth here. It's impressive how Georgia and the United States and Malta can have so much similarities. And our vision is that of building a digital Malta whereby we are looking at moving forward and embracing the digital revolution and also Industry 4.0, whereby we are looking at our island becoming a digital society where one can find more opportunities than we have found in the past and want to enhance on these opportunities. And rather than seeing technology as a threat, we are looking at the challenges which are being offered and turning them into opportunities for our country and also for international investors who are looking at setting up their operations or else expanding here in Malta, where through the assistance of Malta Enterprise, I am sure that part of the grants they can be benefited from, and then you can start your operations here and start on a journey from where it will take you to a better future, which is the same one which we want for Malta.
Gareth, maybe a concluding question from your end. Malta Enterprise has assisted with incentive, with support measures. What is your take on how effective these are for startups who are seeking to co-locate in Malta?
Well, the simplest thing to address is obviously funding. And Malta Enterprise goes through a very careful process of looking at the viability of a business and the value of the ideas to Malta. But once that's done, the funding support that's provided is very significant and is designed to ensure that you can execute upon the plan. That's very important for most startups, but there's more to it. So Malta Enterprise took us into each of the government departments that we would relate to so that we could discuss our plans with them and get support for the way that we wanted to move forward, and also understand the environment. And so Malta Enterprise made it a very easy exercise to enter into a new jurisdiction. And in turn, Malta has made it very easy to enter into the European Union. And I think that's incredibly valuable. Georgia generates incredible fintech companies. Some of the best fintech and payment companies in the world come out of Georgia. And to move into the European market is a big jump. It can make people very nervous. You start with language and culture, and how do we relate to a whole new government infrastructure? Well, for Georgia companies, I think this is their opportunity to come to Europe and grow stronger. So I think it's an incredible opportunity. We benefited from it, and we think many others can too.
Great, thank you for your kind words, for your trust in Malta, and for making also this happen today.
Thank you.
Minister, I'd like to put up to yourself the last words in order to wrap up this conversation that we've had today.
Yes, finally, I would like to thank Gareth for your kind, very kind words about Malta. I would like also to thank our colleagues at Malta Enterprise for their hard work, which I do believe a lot in, and I do believe is making us go ahead, forward, and enacting great leaps in our digital and technological sector. Malta is open for business, and I do invite you all to be a part of our project.
Thank you, Minister Bartolo. Thank you to Gareth, and thank you also to my colleague Brian Camilleri, who has worked upon not only the TrustStamp project, but also the event today. And I would pass on the message to anyone who's listening in to reach out to Malta Enterprise if they're interested in co-locating to Malta and expanding to Malta, via our email address or our website, maltaenterprise.com. Thank you for now, and regards from Malta.
Hello, Fintech South, and welcome. My name is Chris Skinner, and some of you may well know me already. I write a lot. I write a blog every single day at thefinancer.com, and there's at the moment almost 20 books out there, the most recent one being Doing Digital, which was quite timely in that it came out in the spring, just as the pandemic hit, and was all about how banks could use technology to become truly digital, which is pretty prescient right now. And as many of you will know, because you probably spent 6 months or more at home, that everything now is digital. If you cannot do things digitally, then it doesn't work. And that's really what the pandemic has brought home to me and to you and to all of us, that we're working from home, we're ordering from home, we're being entertained at home, we're doing everything from home. And that's the beauty of the internet. At the same time, it's also a huge challenge for companies that weren't ready for doing everything from home, of which most banks, I would claim, were in that predicament. I'm dealing with a lot of banks, particularly those in the UK, remotely, and their call centers became hugely challenged right at the start of the pandemic because they didn't have any staff in the office and they weren't ready for staff dealing with customers from home on the telephone. In fact, the worst example of this is one UK bank had all of their customer contact center in India, and India shut down with 4 hours notice. And I actually haven't been able to talk to that bank since March, and this is now the end of September, so that's pretty awful, really. But that's the nature of where we are today, and it's meant that the fintech community has seen huge opportunity to grow because the fintech community is built and born on the internet. That's the whole point. And the fintech community is built and born cloud native, which the banks have never committed to and have never delivered. And they're only now doing it because they've been forced to do it to allow customers and staff to work from home and have service from home. So I've seen a lot of movements towards cloud in the last 6 months within the big banks, but they're only doing it because they have to. They're not actually transforming to be truly digital, which is still a big challenge for them. In fact, it's interesting when you look at this crisis, which is bailing out the people, compared to 12 years ago when we bailed out the banks. In 2008, we had a crisis within the financial community created by the banks that meant that many banks that were systemically important were systemically failing and they had to get bailed out by the government. That created a perfect storm because in 2008, we had cloud computing rising along with smartphone and the mobile network moving from 2G now to 5G. And as a result, the mobile Internet of Things is what we all live with today, which is why we're living happily, working and being serviced and entertained from home. But we couldn't have done that 12 years ago. But 12 years ago, many companies had the vision to say we could be part of that new world of truly cloud-native digital service. And that's what fintech is all about. It's the reason why fintech communities have seen such a massive rise of investment over the past decade, and why so many fintech companies today are worth so much more than traditional financial institutions. Ant Group, the Chinese technology-led financial company, is about to go through an IPO that will value them as being more valuable than the most valuable bank in the world, JP Chase. PayPal is worth more than Bank of America. Square is worth more than Goldman Sachs. Stripe is worth more than 3 Deutsche Banks. You know, these are the numbers that we're talking about today of companies that have risen based on making payments and finance and lending and deposit and saving and everything easy through technology. And they don't try and dominate end-to-end services. They just try and dominate a specific process within the financial service spectrum. And this is the key point I keep making, that it's the companies that specialize around process through technology via APIs and cloud that will succeed far more than the traditional institution, which tries to own everything end to end in the whole value and supply chain. And that's something banks have to do them to learn and to translate and transition from and to. So today we're living in a world that's very different to 2008. Today we're bailing out the people. We're having a situation that many of us didn't expect, although we could have planned for. And this lockdown and this issue of how to do everything completely digital. And I think most banks were caught out by that because they didn't have any truly digital structure. They didn't have digital at their core. And they're now trying to transform and reform and transition to a digital structure because they've had to. Most fintech companies were built for the truly digital world we live in today. They were born on the internet cloud native, but some of them are struggling with funding and some of them are struggling with differentiating their business proposition and their idea. There are already many fintech leaders out there. I've mentioned several. And although there may be several competing leaders like Stripe, Square, Adyen, and Klarna, they are all finding their niche, their space, they're growing, they're funded, they're attractive, they have the investment community behind them. And I think that's very much a specific point right now, that this is a blossoming of the fintech world because of the lockdown and having to be truly digital from home. In that, if you look at the companies getting the most investment today, it's truly digital companies. It's the Amazons, the Facebooks, the Microsofts, the Googles, and the Stripes, Squares, Klarnas, and others that are really getting the investment today because they're truly digital from birth rather than trying to become digital. And so as we go forward, what we're going to see is more and more partnerships between big banks and startup and fintech companies to try and build better financial services that's truly digital and cloud native. And that's really turbocharged the transition from what would have been maybe 2030 to 2020, because most large financial institutions didn't commit to cloud native services until the lockdown happened. Now they have committed to the services because they've been forced to. Where I see us going next is interesting in that when fintech started in the early 2010s, a lot of discussion was around disruption and destruction of traditional banking. And by the end of the 2010s, it's more around partnership and collaboration with traditional banking. Now we're moving into full integration with traditional banking. And so as we go forward, we will see a lot more full integration of technology and finance, to the point where I hope by the end of this decade, and as we enter the 2030s, we won't talk about fintech anymore. We'll just talk about technology and finance together. I mean, it's not fintech, it's just finance running on the internet, cloud native, fully technologically enabled. And that's where a lot of the new companies see their opportunity, because they can build more of their cloud native apps, API, analytics, services into the traditional financial community in partnership and collaboration, because they focus on automating processes, not trying to do the whole thing. And that's where the sweet spot is, the automation of financial processes through apps, APIs, and analytics that are cloud native. So I wish you well for the rest of the conference and appreciate the opportunity to talk with you. Thanks very much. And once again, my name is Chris Skinner. I hope to see you next year face to face.